Hello everyone, I'm Lonnie with Untitled Learn Network, brought to you by Infinity Flux out of Hickson, Tennessee. And as we gear up for Con Nigga 2018, I want to begin by talking about my top 10 favorite movies of all time. This isn't necessarily the best 10 of all time or, whatever. It's just my personal top 10. Chances are my top 10 is not going to be your top 10. This is my personal top 10. Alright, beginning with number 10. What will that be? 28 Days Later. Believe it or not, this is the only horror film in my entire top 10. And it's in there because I didn't want my top 10 to be without a horror film. But this, to me, is my favorite horror film of all time. 28 Days Later, it almost single-handedly brought the zombie genre back. It stars Cillian Murphy. It's kind of like a Walking Dead type thing. Of course, they did this, years before The Walking Dead did. I actually think it may have came out around the same time as the comic book. He wakes up after he crashes his bicycle. He's like a courier. He delivers stuff. He crashes. He wakes up, and they all of the UK has been overrun by infected, who aren't technically zombies per se, but are more like infected people. They have something called rage, which is kind of like rabies on steroids. And it's basically him teaming up with a few other people in their struggle for survival and hopefully a rescue at some point. Number 9. What could it be? Pulp Fiction. This movie, to a lot of people, rates a lot higher. But for me, it made my top 10. Like number 6 through 10 are almost interchangeable. Pulp Fiction, one of my favorite movies. John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Bruce Willis, several other individuals. Also Quentin Tarantino film, and of course, everybody knows about this movie. A lot of it is shot like out of order. Some of the best dialogue of any movie in my top 10. Just overall great film. I love it. If you haven't seen it, you're in the minority. Please check it out. Great movie. Number 8. The Shawshank Redemption. Now, I watched this movie again yesterday, believe it or not. And it actually wasn't in my top 10 just because I forgot about it. And I watched it again and I was like, yep, this movie's going into my top 10. So this movie made it. Excellent movie about a guy who is wrongly imprisoned for the murder of his wife and her lover, and it's actually a Stephen King film. It lacks that kind of horror element, but it's a great movie about a guy who his 20 years in Shawshank prison. There's so much that can be said. I could do just an entire video on just this film. But Shawshank Redemption, amazing movie. Guy spends time in prison and ends up, I don't really want to give spoilers, so check it out. This video will be spoiler free. Number 7, Clerks. This movie was, at one point, was my favorite film. But, the years, while they have been kind to it, the Clerks did not stay number 1. Lots of other stuff came out in the meantime. Clerks basically is about a guy who is Dante, who gets played by Brian O'Halloran, who I recently interviewed at Wizard World, which is even cooler. This is Kevin Smith's first movie. Dante gets called in on his day off, and it basically all the hijinks that ensue. This movie also introduced Jay and Silent Bob, the View Askew universe, and all kinds of stuff that Kevin Smith has been known for. Number 6, Days of Thunder. This is probably, honest to God, the most out of place movie in my top 10. Most people wouldn't even put this movie in their top 100, but it has a nostalgic place in my heart. Tom Cruise basically plays a open wheel IndyCar driver or sprint car driver, who they just take a chance on mid-season, bring him in, team him up with a crew chief who is played by Robert Duvall. The movie has a lot of good actors in it. It's actually one of John C. Reilly's very first movies, and it's basically all the struggles that Tom Cruise, who plays character Cole Trickle, goes through as he rises to the top of stock car racing. Next up, Pink Floyd The Wall. Pink Floyd The Wall barely cracked my top 5. I love this movie. I don't really want to call it a movie per se, as much as it is like a really long music video. It's basically a music video for the entire The Wall album. It tells the story of a guy named Pink, who is a rock star, who had some really major issues growing up as far as like family and school. And it all kind of comes to a head when he's older. He's a rock star, and he finds out his wife has been cheating on him, and then he just kind of goes insane from that point on. Really good movie, well worth the watch. Even if you're not a Pink Floyd fan, the movie is amazing. Next up, number 4, the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film. Ah, God, I went and saw this movie in theaters twice when I was in kindergarten, if that tells you anything. This movie was amazing. This movie still holds up. The Jim Henson puppeteering still is amazing to this day. The movie is more based on the comic book, the original comic book by Eastman and Laird, as opposed to the cartoon. It does have a few little cartoon elements, but I mean, this was a great, great movie. It had more of a dark tone than all the other Ninja Turtle films, and just it told a great story that even now, almost 30 years later, still holds up greatly. Number 3, Bicentennial Man. This movie came really close to getting number 1. I absolutely love this movie. It is stars Robin Williams, who plays an android that is purchased by a family, and he ends up staying with this family through generations over the course of like 200 years. And he is he's a very unique android that has feelings, emotions, and the robotics company sees it as a defect, and they want to put him out of service because, obvious reasons. But his owner, who is actually played by Sam Neill from Jurassic Park, decides he wants to keep him the way he is, and over time, as technology improves, he's given skin, he's given a face, he's given a circulatory system, nerves, that kind of thing, and eventually is given the opportunity to be human and age. And it also tells of his struggles with like the powers that be in the world, where he's wanting to actually become a full-fledged citizen and be declared human. One of very, very few films that can make me cry like a baby every single time I watch it. One of my all-time favorite films, and easily probably the film that gets me emotionally more than any other. Number 2, Man on the Moon. I absolutely love this movie. This is another movie that gets the heartstrings going. Jim Carrey does an amazing job playing Andy Kaufman, who is a kind of a... I guess he would be considered like a troll before trolls were a thing, maybe? Andy Kaufman was one of the great comedians of like the late 70s, early 80s, and he ended up dying of lung cancer in the early 80s. He liked to play jokes on people, he liked to entertain people, and he was a comedian who was way ahead of his time. And if you want more insight on the making of this movie, check out the Netflix documentary Jim and Andy, which is an amazing addendum to this film. This film is amazing, and that documentary is right on par with it. Almost made number 1. Seriously, it was so close. But what was number 1? And that movie, that distinction, goes to Boogie Nights, which I actually just watched a few minutes ago again. I discovered this movie in high school. I bought the VHS of it. It was a great movie. It stars so many good actors, even actors who are still major names today. It stars Mark Wahlberg, Julianne Moore, Burt Reynolds, Philip Seymour Hoffman, William H. Macy, Heather Graham, Luis Guzman. I could go on and on and on. This was just an amazing movie. It told the story of Mark Wahlberg's character, Eddie Adams, who changes his name later to Dirk Diggler, who he is a like an adult film star in the late 70s and early 80s. It basically tells of his discovery, his rise, his fall, and a lot of other characters in the movie. It just basically tells their story as a family and how they deal with issues. Not all of them deal with issues the right way. Sometimes things just absolutely go to crap. And I mean, this is one of those movies that the camera work is really what gets me. There are a lot of scenes where it will follow one character, move to another, and you'll have like a 10-minute scene without the camera ever making a cut. Very awesome camera work, very good cinematography, an awesome cast. This movie, I believe, will hold up for decades, if not longer. And it is my number one movie for a reason. It's not just a movie that entertains me. It's a movie that I believe stands far and above just about everything else. An amazing movie. Now, finally, like, I want to go ahead and address the elephant in the room. There were no like comic book movies per se in this list. No Marvel movies, no DC movies. I do love those movies, but regardless of how much I might like those, I don't feel that any of them were able to crack the top 10. That's just the way I feel. Maybe they'll put another movie, maybe like Infinity War or something, and as time goes on, maybe one of those movies will crack the top 10. But until then, sorry. Anyway, this has been my top 10 movies. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Subscribe to our channel. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any disagreements, feel free to leave those in the comments and we'll discuss. I'm Lonnie with Untitled Nerd Network, brought to you by Infinity Flux out of Hickson, Tennessee. This has been my top 10 favorite movies. My top 10. Hope everybody enjoyed. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks for watching.